Mm.
An inline variable is where, well, we're used to having code that looks like this, right? Where you've got a begin and an end, and maybe the procedure is here. So you got the procedure name, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
And we declare our variables here,
Mm.
right? Which is fine in itself. But we can now declare them down here as well, in which
Mm.
case you would sort of go, well, what we do? Why would I care? Why is it better or worse above or below the begin? Okay, well, the point is, if you imagine I've got this procedure and maybe all of this code here could be 10 pages long, and I want to do something like just to store some value temporarily in here, I can declare the variable close to the code where I'm going to use it. So I don't have to
Mm.
keep paging up 10 pages to get back to here and then paging all the way back down again. You can also scope that. So if I put that inside begin end here, it's only available through the life of that begin end, right? So
Mm.
if I had an if statement and I've got an if then and a begin, it's only going to exist for the life of that. That means I could actually go down further and declare it again with the same name if I wanted to. Okay, so inline variables can actually be quite useful. Now, looking into them a little bit further. One thing I do a lot in Oracle code is you can declare a variable and you can put a default value there. Okay, can't do that in Delphi. I have to declare the variable and then go down here and say, there's the default value,
Mm.
right? I like it being all in the one piece there. With inline variables, you can declare a default value.
Mm.
So you can do that. So instead of having 2 lines, now I've just got one, declare the variable, and I've got a default value. Okay,
Mm.
that could even be a create. So if that was an object, where are we here? Right, I could say that is the type is tAnimal and it's equal to tAnimal.create. All right, so it doesn't have to be a default value that's like a number or a string. It can be an object. So there's just 3 examples of just declaring each one. One thing I find really annoying, you've got to put a var or a const definition for every single one. So, if this was where we originally had it, you just put var once, and then you can just say X and Y, right?
Mm.
Each one of those, you only have to put the word var once. With inline, you've got to put it for each one. So
Mm.
that's a bit annoying. Now, I can live with that. It's not that big a deal, but let me show you the thing that I don't like about this. No, before we do that, I'll show you one more thing, which actually kind of neat. C code. Got some C code here. Now, C programmers like to stir up us Delphi programmers and say, oh, Delphi's too verbose, it's too wordy. C is more concise, right? You got to type in less. Look at that. You just got a bracket there instead of a begin end.
Mm.
Yeah, you know what? Whoopie do. It's not that big a deal. But have a look at this. This is one thing that's very common in C. I've got a loop here. I want to loop through it 5 times, or actually 6, from 0 through to 5. So it's 6.
Mm.
And I can do it like this. I can declare the loop variable inside the loop definition, right? Whereas if I was in Delphi land, I've got to declare the variable, so blah, 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 X integer, or a byte or whatever you want. Okay, and then I've got to go set it to a value, make that 5, and then I can do a loop for X in, sorry, I get mixed up with Oracle and Delphi syntax here, but like X
Mm.
in, all right, 1, let's say 5 to 10 or something like that. So yeah, you've got it's like 3 lines of code, whereas in C world you get just 1. Well, we can actually basically do this in like 1 line of code. So up here, we've got an example of the same thing, but I'm using an inline variable. So now being a bit cheeky, right? I mean, I've put 2 lines of code there. I've moved up into 1, but that's okay. Look at that. That is a lot more like this short, concise C example.
Yeah.
And again, if you've got
That's
10
cheating.
pages of code above it, oh, it's not. I just put it, I just did that. You can have 2 lines of Delphi on one code. The syntax
Oh, no,
allows it.
see, you
Anyway,
won't convince me. C is beautiful.
You can just put var inside the for loop.
whereabouts in here, like for var
No.
x?
No. Yeah, that's it for var x. That's it.
Mm.
I'd have to have a look at that. Let's go and give that a shot. Go back to
Now,
Delphi.
Yes,
I
you
do that a
definitely
lot
can.
because what happens is it goes out of scope if you try to use that variable outside the for loop.
Right.
Mm.
Let's try this. For blah, 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 do something. So you're saying you can just do a var there? Let's
Yeah,
try
that's
that.
right.
Okay, it doesn't like that, but that's okay. Well, look at that. How concise is that? We'll have to go and add that back to my little note over there. So there you go. And now Les is not stirring me up so much because it's not even
good.
cheating anymore, is it? Hey, look at that. How
That's
sweet is
brilliant.
that? So whenever they whine about it, it's not concise. There you go. So yeah, okay. So inline variables, yeah, nice. Actually, I use them a lot when I'm writing a huge program with the Oracle work that I do, and you can't break it up because I've often inherited code from someone else. They've wrote like a procedure, it's 10 pages long. Right?
Yeah.
I don't have the luxury of saying, rejig it all. If I rejig it, I've got to test and debug it, and can't do that. So yeah, just inline variable. Now, one thing I really don't like, just have a look at this example here. So I've declared 4 variables there, right? Inline variables. If I use the code reformatter, let's go and do this, right? Go, where are we? Okay, so I'm just going to dump that in there. Code reformatter, I think it's Control D. Let's have a look, see what it does. Actually, just I'm going to copy it twice so we can compare it. All right, take that. Where's the reformatter? Format source. Oh, there we go. Control D. Right. What did it do? It uglified it. Oh, look at this. For the first one, it indented it. For the rest, there's no indent. And they're all on 2 lines instead of 1. Now, maybe there's some options if you go through the tools reformat option. Maybe there's something to control that. But as soon as I saw that, I went, oh, no, okay, that kind of put me off. Now, mind you, I don't reformat code very often. It's more like if I've inherited somebody else's code, pulled some code off the net, and I want to restructure it just to, because it's not well structured. But yeah. Now the other thing I'm always testing with new features is so reformat to 1. The other thing I like to retest is if I refactor. So I'm going to say take this code, pull it out into a separate unit. Now it might not be happy doing this because it's usually the code's got to be valid before you can do this. So I'm just going to clean this code up a little bit. Right, let's try and take those, refactor. I think it's usually Control Shift M. No, I can't do it now. But I've had this problem for the last couple of days where it hasn't been allowing me to refactor extract methods. But yeah, that's one thing I like to test. If I've got a new feature like this where it's particularly a different way of coding, just try do the reformat, try do the refactor, and just see if it works or if it's broken.
It might be that the vars are breaking that. I'm not sure. Back in like 10.42 or something, at the top of your IDE screen there, underneath where it says Unit 1.
You know what? You're right. I think it broke it. Yeah. Look at this. Refactor. Now it works. Right. Take out the comments. Try and refactor that. Normally, you just say take some code like this. I got a hotkey. I use Shift Control M. No, that's not it. Shift. Oh, I can't remember. Refactor. No, see, even that it's not even letting me refactor that 1 line of code because it's got these vars in there. I've got to get rid of that. And then
Scott, see at the top of the screen where it says test.
Yep.
Yep, right there.
Yep.
If you click on that arrow, it shows you all the procedures and functions that you have in your in your unit.
Yep.
And that wasn't working in 10.4.2, say, if you had any inline variables at all
Okay.
in the
So
entire thing.
I'm just going to try and compile this again. So now that's there. Let's try if I get rid of that, and I'm just going to rename that. And it's now there. Okay. So I'm on 11.3, which is now, like a year and a half old. Yeah. So if you like refactoring code, inline variables are gonna cause a problem. It's gonna, I haven't tested in Delphi 12. Maybe it's improved. Give me a sec. I'm just having a quick look at this.
Yeah, the refactoring would be always looking at variables outside the block. So the inline variables are definitely the ones that are breaking it now.
Yeah, I mean, this should work. These are variables just like any other variable up here, but the refactoring engine just can't handle it.
If you stuck them up there and then you tried to refactor it, it'd do it.
Oh, that'll be fine. Yeah, but then I've got to get rid of these default values because I'm not allowed to have those. So if I did that,
I don't really know what the game is. Well laid out, or should be.
I've got to go define it like that.
Yeah, always. Martin Fowler wrote a whole book about it.
I don't know if it even makes sense to extract just those. No, it doesn't. But if I just say that is equal to a number, it'll probably let me extract that.
So I don't know anyone that uses refactoring. He says I do.
Okay, so that is now okay. But if I took these, moved them into there, I think we'll find that the refactor is broken. Yeah. So they're the things I'm always testing with new Delphi features, and I like to wait until they're working well with the reformatting and with the refactoring. So yeah, so just be aware of that. Okay, let's look at constants. Push that way a bit. Okay. So what constants have we got in life? Death, taxes, right? They're the things that are constant, right? Delphi constants, right? They're constant. Oh, wait a second. Delphi constants are not constant. There's at least 3 situations I know where you can edit a constant, right? Is that crazy? That's wacky. Let me just go and show that to you. Okay, well, first of all, is actually one that you're very aware of already, I would think. If I've got something like this, or even a button. Okay, my button, it's a T button. Right, now if I make that a constant, constant means it's read-only. You can't change it, right? And then down here in my code, right, if I say call that procedure, what was it called? To call test, and I tell it to pass in the name of the button on my form. Okay, so I'm calling that procedure. That's a constant. You would think that it won't let you change that, right? Now, the thing is, though, this works. Right, I can change the text on that button. That works fine. That'll compile. That'll run fine. Even though you go, hang on, I'm changing it. Isn't the constant meant to be read only? Well, here's the thing. This is
that's a pointer.
It's a pointer. So if I had 2 buttons, right, button 1 and button 2, when I call this, I'm passing in the name of a button. I can't change it to point to the other button. So I can't say that like that. You see what I mean? This is changing it to point to a different button. You can't do that. That breaks the constant. Doing this is, I'm changing, this is a pointer to a button, and for that button, I'm changing the label on the button. That's allowed, right? But that's first thing for new players where they kind of go, oh, a constant must mean it's not editable. You can't repoint it, but you can actually change the properties of that if that's an object. So that's one example. It's probably what people are most used to. Yeah. Let's look at another one. Okay, if you do something like that, whether it's a string or a number or object or anything at all, it lets you make a change to that. Now, the thing with Delphi is whenever you're passing something in as a parameter, in some cases, it will make a copy of that object. And in some cases, it doesn't. So if I do this, so if I do that, when I call this, it knows that that's like a pointer. So instead of copying the entire object, it's actually, I don't even think it does that, but instead of copying just even the pointer to another pointer, it passes in the original. So it doesn't make a copy of the pointer and then pass in the copy. It passes in the original. Now that is then editable because that's the actual original pointer. I can say point that to another button, and that will work fine. Let me get my head around where I'm going here. Right. Now let's do some subclassing. So I've got a little example here. Give me a second. Yeah, that'll do. No, that's constants. Oh, that was that. That wasn't what I wanted to see. Give me a second. I had another demo here somewhere. Parameters. That's probably it. Okay, so in this example, I've just set up two little classes. So this one's an object type's called an animal, and I've got a second one here called a dog, and the dog is a type of animal. So this is like the parent class. This is the child class, right? So an animal can be a dog or it can be a cat or something else. So it's got a parent-child kind of a hierarchy. Now let's just have a look at that. If I set up some procedures and see what we can do. So if I create a procedure here, and I tell it to pass in an animal, when I call that, I can pass in an animal or a dog. It lets me pass in both the parent and the child. It's okay with each one. Okay, oops, that one there. So that works okay. But I can also pass it in as a pointer. So one of the standard things we're taught to improve performance in Delphi is use vars, because a var is passing in the original object or value, it doesn't make a copy of it. Okay. So a var is pointing to the original thing. So it doesn't have to make a copy, which takes a lot of time. It's just pointing in the original one. However, the thing with a var, I'll get back to a const. The thing with a var, you can only pass in the exact thing that you've specified there. So if I look at where I call this one, right? That parameter is defined as a T animal. I've got to pass in an animal object. I can't pass in a dog, right? So when you've got a var, when you pass an object into the parameter, it's got to be the exact same thing there. You can't pass in a subclass. It's got to be the original class. Okay, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's hard typed. It'll only take that one thing. Here's something new that came in. Oh, if we look at const, const does allow it to be a subclass, right? However, it's const, which means it's read-only, right? You can't change the pointer to something else, right? So var is fast because you're passing the original, but you can't pass in the child. It's got to be the exact class there. If you make it a const, it'll let you pass in both the parent and the child. Pass in an animal or pass in a dog, it's okay with that, but it's read-only, right? So if I tried to change that to point to, or if I tried to create it like something like that, it would say, no, if you're creating a new animal, that's changing this, and this thing here is read-only because it's a constant. Okay. All right. Here's where it gets weird. Remember we said constants are read-only, right? I mean, constants, they're constant. You can't change them. There's a variation on this const parameter. it's called a ref const, and that's what it looks like. Okay.
This is a hack.
Now, the weird thing is, yeah, totally it is, yeah. It basically, ref const is basically the same as a var, but it lets you pass in the parent or the child, right? Pass in an animal or pass in a dog. I don't know why they didn't, I mean, why did they use that with the word const? It just does your head in, right? I mean, const means read only. But by doing this, it's now editable. It treats it like it's a var. So even though it's a const there, I can actually say, I'm going to go and repoint that, right, and point it to a new instance of that. So I'm modifying the value that it's passing in, right? So that's what I mean about the constants are not always constant. This is, really they should have called that a ref var. That would have made more sense. I don't want, ref obviously means reference, but ref var would have made a lot more sense than ref const for what it's doing. Yeah.
It's clearer in C++, a const ref. So so imagine in like you put some C code on the it's the same in C actually. So you might have int for integer, and then the variable name I, right? So int I.
Right.
I'm just gonna. Do you mind if I share the screen?
You want to share? Yeah, try it. Sure. I think you can already.
Let me try.
I might need to stop sharing mine first. Just give me a second.
It's really interesting what you're saying there, because there's a thing called. I mean, Scott might be all over this, I suspect. But a few years back, I came across the words covariant and contravariant, and it's kind of related to all this stuff. And I mean, I'm sure there's simple ways of looking at it, but it can be a bit of a headbender. Do you have anything to say in that direction, Scott?
Which got nothing from me. I'm not a C guy.
Oh,
so...
sorry, I meant Scott V.
Yep.
No, I don't do C.
But with the I think you know way more than I do about like inheritance and subclassing and that sort of thing. I mean, this has got to do with the what do you call it? The Liskov, the solid principle. The L is for Liskov substitution. It's about where in your code can you use one thing equivalently as some other thing, and that's kind of like what Scott Hollows was saying about where you can pass in an animal or a what do you call it? Inherent ancestor. The other way, descendant. Right? Am I sure? Okay, we're showing the screen there. And when I sat down to try and understand variable declarations in C++, like I spent 3 awful afternoons, I reckon. I mean, functions in C++ and C are crazy. You can get like int pointer bracket f int, like this is that's a function called f that takes in an int and returns you a pointer. And then if it looks like this, that's a pointer to a function pointer to a function that takes in an int and returns a, it's horrible. It's crazy. But if you can also write in C++ functions like this, a bit more like we have, auto f integer int I, okay, and returns an int. I think we can write that in C++. Yeah, that compiled. Okay, so that's just a function from an integer to an integer that we would write almost similarly, right? But with more, we'd type function f integer I type in, anyway, I think we can see that. So why did I start talking function? I shouldn't have. If you have a constant I equals 0, right? Then that means, constant integer. That means you've got this integer, it's an I, and it's 0, and it's always going to be 0, right? You can have a constant int star, which is a pointer to an integer. That's equal to, say, 0, right? Or in this case, it could be, we'll call that J. Because it's a pointer, you could make it the address of, what's the address of? The address of I. And that compiles. Okay, so you can have a constant integer, you can have a constant pointer, but you can also have a pointer to a constant value equal 1, I think. Could be a little rusty on this stuff. What was the problem? Oh, okay, it's a pointer. Just call it that. No, we need that, and we need an address. Okay, so address of I. No, what's the problem? Oh, Delphi uses @ for address and C++ uses ampersand. Hopefully that will be constant to. Anyway, okay, so let's get rid of the const then. Okay. Okay, this is my skill in C++. But you can have, K can be a variable that's a pointer to a particular type of variable, right? You can have a constant pointer. You can have a pointer to a variable. You have a constant pointer to a changeable variable. You can have a changeable pointer to a constant variable, right? And you can have a constant pointer to a constant variable, if that makes sense. So there's a bit more fine granularity than Delphi, as in which things are allowed to change. And our const ref that we use you were showing us in Delphi is where the pointer is constant, but the variable itself can change in value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, pointers in C are an invention of the devil. They drive you crazy. The hardest things in the world to understand, because you can have references to references to references, so it can go anywhere you like, as long as you kind of got your feet on the ground and you know what you're pointing to, whether it's an address or an actual value. Don't have them too deep is the secret, I think.
But what Scott was showing us was something I've been trying to nut out, because it makes sense, like in your first example where you have a T animal and you can send any of the descendants, because the T animal is kind of like this big. And when you inherit, you got at least this base part plus some more. And then you inherit again, so you got the base part and some more, right? So then if you've got a function that wants to work with T animal, like we've always got that base part. We don't care about the rest of it. We can ignore it if it's there, and it can do all of its work, because all it needs is the quality of being a T animal, right? the thing with, like Scott was showing us with the var, that took me a bit recently to, like, I came across it recently. I was like trying to figure that out. It's like when you're accepting, I don't care if you're bigger because I'm only going to use this part. But the var also goes in the other direction, because when you're finished, you know, all those changes will appear back in the main program. And so it's like, well, I could have a bigger, but I'm going to end up with little. And if I had big in the middle, it would end up with little. So it's basically saying T animal is what we're going to use on both sides of the coin, and there's no flexibility in that, because it's like two overlapping constraints in opposite directions. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but that's how I explained it to me.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, Scott.
Yeah, my head's exploded. Yep. Okay. So I said there were 3 constant things that are like, you know, they're not constant anymore all the time. There's one more. And this one is with constant variables. So let's do this.
Off one sheet. Wow.
Oh, you know, actually, I should point out, you don't have to specify the data type with constants. So if I get rid of that, it will just use the smallest data type. So it'll try and make it a byte or an integer, or a, yeah, if you make it a string, it'll just infer the data type based on that. So I could say, make that a string, and it will just know that's a string and not a number. Anywho, so
and that's genuinely
let's do this.
constant.
Yeah. What this bit?
As soon as you put a type in, it stops being genuinely constant.
So you're saying if I do that, it's like
it's just
really
the equal
constant.
sign.
Well, let's see if we can break this. So there's my constant. Let's see if I can make it editable, which is really not constant. So if I say that is equal to something else, compile that. No, it doesn't like that. But you know what? There's a way to do this. Watch this.
Yeah, you can
put a
force that.
compiler directive, J directive. You put a J plus. I don't know what. I have no idea what the J stands for. Jagged, junky, stupid, maybe. Compile that. Oh, no, it doesn't like that. I think you're right there because of that data type. So let's do this. That compiles. Look at that. It's a constant, but I'm changing the value. And that's why.
And
this
you don't need
J
the
compiler
either.
directive allows you to change the values of constants.
I don't think you need the J compiler directive either.
Pretty sure you do. Let's get rid of that. Try to compile it. No, it doesn't like it.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, I've got mine on by default.
Yeah, maybe it's in your options somewhere. Okay, so this J thing. Okay, so what the heck's happening here? Why have we got a constant that is no longer constant? We can edit it. It seems crazy. Okay, it turns out the history of this is, from what I've read, there was a very old Pascal compiler that supported editable constants. So to try and be compatible with all the compilers out there, Borland or Delphi, whoever wrote the engine in the first place, put this option in there. You can also change this by going, I think it's in the project options. You won't find it under like the tools options, right? So, and I just want to point out, I hate these single letter compiler directives, right? Like, I mean, what's wrong with having a meaningful word in there? Why is it J? Just annoying. Anyway, so there's 3 examples of constants. Memory. What's that?
In 1980, we needed the memory.
Yeah, we couldn't afford those like extra characters in the source code short on disk. Yeah, it kind of makes sense, but yeah. Yeah. Okay, so while we're talking about constants, we'll move away from editable constants, and I want to talk about line breaks. So we're probably quite used to saying something like this: show a message, right, blah, 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 line 1, and then we do like a hash 10. Right, so when I run this, that hash 10 becomes a line break. Right, so I get 2 lines there. That's a line break. Yeah, a lot of people are used to writing that kind of code. Now, the problem is
You can't spread it.
You
out.
might put it here. You might also put it if you're writing code, if you're writing text out
So
to
you
a
can't
file.
put bigger font on it, Chris?
Oh, you want
Yeah,
Scott to-
I'll make it a bit bigger. There we go.
You want Scott to zoom in.
There we go. Yeah. So look, the problem is this works well on Windows, not so good on other platforms. So Windows, Mac, and Unix all have different ways, different standards for using end of lines. The Unix or POSIX, I should say, I think they use 10. Windows is a ASCII 13 plus an ASCII 10. I've seen ones that use just a 10 or a 13, a 10 or a 13, and I even came across one case where it was actually 1310, flipped the other way around. So the point is, we really shouldn't be doing this anymore, right? No more doing plus 10. What we should be doing is this,
Yeah.
right? S line break. If we go and dig into the source code for this, right, it's got some smarts built in to say if it's a Unix-based system, that's POSIX, we'll use a 10. If it's Windows, we're going to use, there we go, a 1310, not the 10 anymore, which we've been using, 1310. Okay, so anywhere you've got code that does like a plus 10, you should change it to that. Now, what I don't like though is that's kind of verbose. You know, we went from something short like that, and now it's this longer text. So what I like to do in my program somewhere, I'll create a we do as a const. I like to call it NL new line. And can I just do this? Does that work? Yep, that works. Okay, so now instead of saying plus line break, I say plus NL, and that way it's like as short as concise, actually even shorter than it was with the hash 10. Okay, so use S line break. We shouldn't be using the hash 10 anymore. And it's really only the end of line character that's an issue. Other ASCII characters are fine, but yeah, end of line character.
Should have use LB.
Use the what? LB? What's that? Line break? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's my personal preference. You could use something else, but yeah, I think most people would see that and realize it's a new line. Yeah, if you put LB line break, you know, it's reasonably obvious without even knowing anything about this. You'd sort of go, okay, that looks like it's a line break. Line break, new line. Okay.
We've also got multi-line strings in the new Delphi.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a bit of a weird syntax with that one. It's like
pull that straight out of Python.
You do something like this. It's like 3 quotes and then blah, 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 and then you can make it like that. All right. So the string is actually over multiple lines and terminate at the end. You terminate with 3 quotes, or is it still a single?
You terminate with 3, and wherever the start of those 3 quotes are, that's considered the 0 point for new lines.
Right.
So anything that's in line with the end 3 points is hard left.
Right. Okay, so yeah, that's how we can do multi lines now. I think, was that a Delphi 12 thing or 11? I think it's
that's Delphi 12.
12, yeah.
Oh, by the way, a patch has dropped for Delphi 12. Maybe it'll solve your problem that is frustrating you with 12.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, because I'll show you where it is. We go to the forums. This is where I explained it to the user group. And this guy said, here's a link in here. So this is the Embarcadero defect, and they haven't even opened it.
Right.
Open, they haven't even started work on it. I put a detailed screenshot. I even put a video in there. If you click on that, it shows a video where I showed them step by step how to go through and set this up. So this is, I'll see if I can just get there to show you this. They're gonna do it. Yeah, see what it's done? The title bar there is gone. So you can't use that to resize. You can't resize. You can't remove them from a doc.
Yeah. By the way, Quality Portal is, last I checked, still read only.
Yeah, they're moving it to a new one. So what is that? Is that DevOps based or?
Yeah, not sure. All I know is that they ticked me off, so I wanted to put something in there and couldn't.
Right.
Yeah, they're not going to be using Jira anymore, I think.
Mm.
Right.
See, I think you didn't press the space bar.
Okay, let's move along a bit. We've been talking about functions a bit, so just I'll just show you a
Oh, one other
little
thing
weird thing
before
with
we move off
functions.
constants.
Yeah.
When you put attributes in, which is, like that ref thing was an attribute.
Yeah, the ref.
You can put Yep. So that's
So that is actually
you
an
can-
attribute. You're right.
Yep. You can create your own attributes and pass in constants, but not if they're typed.
Right.
So
We could
only
really
untyped
do with a presentation on attributes. It's something that's not well documented, and
I can do that.
yeah, could be really keen to
I
do
use it a
that.
fair
Paul,
amount.
can you just note that down as a potential presentation? Scott Van der Linden doing attributes. So that ref thing, is
Already on.
an attribute.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's on the list.
Okie dokie. Okay. Just a brief thing about functions. I'm just going to go and create a new.
I'll email you,
one of these.
Scott V, to ask about suitable timing and convenient timing and all the rest of it.
Sure.
Okay, I'm just going to do this, have that return an integer. So we're used to doing something like that, right? Saying, there's a function, I'm going to return the result like that. Yeah. You can also do this. You can use the function name instead of the word result.
Yep.
You can use the function name instead. Just a weird
Just to make
quirk
things
that,
confusing.
Yeah, I like the result works better. I missed one of the earlier slides. I've just realized this one I got the tip out of Marco Cantu's book on, I think it's like Object Pascal. It's the free one that you can get. You need to just go to a website, you sign up, and you get a link sent to you with a free book. Really good book. Quite a few of these tips I'm showing you today came out of that book. I'll see if I can get the name of that book. Just bear with me for a second. It's the Object Pascal Handbook by Marco Cantu. Really, really good book. It's one that you can just pull it apart and go in depth. The other one I recommend is Alistair Christie's books. All of his books. He's written some insanely in-depth books on Delphi.
What's it called? Object Pascal, Marco's book?
Give me a second. Object Pascal Handbook. He's put it out it's been updated a bunch of times. So the latest version is for Delphi 11.
Yeah.
And yeah, you should find a website where you can just sign up for something and you get it for free.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's in the downloadables too, where you can get it, where you go and find all these stuff, other code.
This little code snippets here I got directly out of Marco's book. I think I just renamed the variables, but the code's pretty much right out of his book. Just looking at some examples of arrays that I often see array code where they're kind of looping through one array. So if I want to say I've got an array, it's just an array of numbers, array of integers. You can populate it with hard-coded values like that. I've seen code that says, okay, I've got an array and I've got a second array, and I want to make a third array based on that one plus that one. And I write some looping code to say loop through the array entries. You don't have to do that. You can just say an array is equal to the first array plus the second array. It just combines them together. It doesn't knock out duplicates. So notice 3 there is in each one. So if you just say add them together, you can end up with 6 values, including the repeated 3. Yep. Okay, so yeah, you can just add two arrays together. You can also do something like that. So an array is one of the arrays plus some hard-coded values. These are also in an array. The square brackets means that's an array, but it's defined in code rather than an array variable up here. There's also some routines you can use: insert, delete. So here I'm saying I've got the array, it's got a bunch of numbers in the array. I can say insert for that array. I want to insert these two numbers at the 4th position. Okay, I hate the way it's got this ordered. I would kind of think it would be more like that. So that's a bit weird. But anyway, yeah, there's an insert routine. There's also a delete. So you can get rid of entries, insert update entries. And I think that's a lot simpler to read than some of the old code that we used to have, which would look a bit more like this, right? Where you're saying, I've got an array, I want to copy from one array, and it's like copying, it's like grabbing a chunk of memory and copying it from one array to another. Yeah, you've got to specify the length of them. Yeah, it was,
or even
the
old move function,
right,
which isn't moving at all.
Yeah. Okay, I was gonna talk about some performance issues, but I think I'll skip that, leave it for another time. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, just a quick talk about some performance issues. There was a thing called fast MM. That's a fast memory manager. So some guy, just one person, basically rewrote the way that Delphi manages memories, right? To assign memory for variables and arrays and objects and everything, right? So basically said, rewrote the whole thing, made it better and faster. And you could choose to use the original Delphi memory manager, or you could use his one. And I was never really keen on that because it seemed like it was, it's like a drastic change. And I'm worried about, well, like, how stable is that going to be? Am I introducing problems? Now, the thing is, with this fast MM, this is now been included in Delphi. So fast MM is now the default memory manager for Windows. If you build a VCL, and I'm pretty sure of FMX application as well, if it's on Windows, they're bundled in fast MM in with Delphi. You don't need to do anything at all. You just get this by default. Now we currently get fast MM version 4. I think there's a more recent one as well, a version 5. So you could go about and do what we did before, which is manually plug this in and install it. I wouldn't be keen on that. I'm worried about stuffing it up. I like the fact that Embarcadero has installed FastMM for me. I don't need to do anything to get it to work. I'd rather stick with the current one. But if you want to live on the bleeding edge, by all means, go and get the latest version of FastMM. The person that developed that was Pierre Lerich. And there's been some other people involved, but he's the key person. So, I also used to think, look, it's built primarily by one person. That seems like well, what if he gets hit by a bus? Is this going to, are my applications going to kind of be locked into this? I mean, look, you can always switch it off, but if I've tested and debugged my application with one memory architecture, if I swap out that memory architecture because it's not working, I've invalidated all of my testing. If I've got a major application, I don't want to go through all of my testing and regression tests, everything again. But yeah, now it's just built in with Delphi. So Embarcadero have just bundled that. Not sure when they started that, but definitely in version 11, that is in there. Okay, I think that's about where I'll pull a plug. Be going on for about an hour or so, just on the Delphi bits. I think we'll leave it there. I've made some notes about other things that I won't talk about. I'll just leave those for another time. Have you guys got any questions on things we've talked about?
You should get a big monitor like that thing I got.
I think that Fast MM5 has got. Was there some licensing issues or something for commercial?
I think it's open source, so I don't think so. It's on the project's on GitHub.
Yeah,
that's it there. I'm just gonna search. Is it free? We've got the word free, royalty free. There you go. Okay, so there is a commercial version. Yeah. Okay, so it seems like it's open source, but it's got two different license types. So yeah, you need to read this carefully. But the one that's bundled in with Delphi, I don't think that applies. Yeah, most people aren't even aware of this. How would they even be aware to go to this and pay for this?
Yeah. Delphi's the
So
FFM4, and
so this is the new version, Fast MM5, and there's licensing costs.
I think it's been out for a few years actually. The 5 version. How long's GitHub been around?
Well, long time.
Long enough for
GitHub's ended up being the standard. Yeah. GitHub's just, there were like half a dozen of these sort of, open, public, free source repositories, but yeah, GitHub's become the major one now.
I wonder when Microsoft bought GitHub for like whatever billion or something. I'd be interested to go back and see how many people were saying, "Yep, that's a smart buy," and how many were people like, "What the hell?"
Yeah, I know there were projects where people were saying, "Oh, I don't like Microsoft, so I'm gonna move away from this." But look, it's it's still free. There's probably some limits to that, I'm guessing, if you had a large number of users, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it's just become like the de facto source management now. Everyone just accepts it, whether you like Microsoft or not. Okay, so I think I will pull the plug there. So some points to note. There's basically 3 lots of books that I recommend. So I pulled a bunch of tips out of Marco's book for part of this. Some other tips from elsewhere. So yeah, Marco's book on the free one, once again, that is the Object Pascal Handbook. I really like Alistair Christie's books, particularly the ones that are on, I think he's got one that's about, let me just double check this. I probably spelt his name wrong, but
AIR.
Sorry?
Alistair AIR.
Yeah, here we go. This is a book I really like. Code Faster in Delphi. Brilliant book. And he's got another one coming out soon as well. Code Better in Delphi, but it's been at the 95% written mark for a while now. But yeah, that's Code Faster in Delphi is probably my favorite top Delphi book of all time. Marco's one's also very good, and also like any books by Nick Hodges. He's done some really good ones over the years. Okay, all right. So that's it from me.